Dark Souls 2 is the controversial middle child of the Souls trilogy that Daddy Miyazaki couldn't pick up from soccer practice because he was too busy making the sweet, sweet baby that is Bloodborne. So Miyazaki calls up Uncle Shibuya, who despite being rad as hell did offer DS2 cigarettes and teach him swear words like open world. So now Dad's gotta call up other uncle, Tanemura, who takes Dark Souls 2 down to the county jail to show him where he'll end up if he doesn't get his act together. Or so I was told by Reddit. Regardless of all this developmental trauma, Dark Souls 2 did turn out pretty solid, but a little quirky. Like how when I swing my fucking greatsword at an enemy I am locked onto, the game likes to snap me in the entire other direction and lock me into the longest light attack I have ever seen, while I take back shots from this guy. Or this guy. Or this guy. But I don't want to talk about the things DS2 gets wrong. The community has been circle jerking its shortcomings since 2014. And there are most definitely a few. Some of them are small, like 3 letters small. Others are roughly the size of a sword's hitbox. And some are... oh no. But today, I want to talk about something DS2 does right. Something it does better than 1 or 3. Dark Souls 2 is absurdist art. And I'm not just saying that because it's absurd I was able to play through the entire game. Last dunk, I promise. So, what do I mean? Albert Camus, the greatest thing to come out of France since Robespierre, is widely considered to be the father of modern absurdism. He explains the concept across multiple essays, which in the current year of our Lord 2025 have been compiled into a book titled after his most famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. This book, despite being 138 pages, is denser than shit, and there's no shortage of good video essays out there dissecting this book's themes if you can't be bothered to read a book. I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll go through the concepts and jingle the little keys of Dark Souls 2 to keep your attention. Before we get into the absurdity of it all, I should mention that we will be covering the concept of suicide. If this is too heavy for you, feel free to check out my video on open mouth kissing. Also, this isn't going to be a video of the complete lore of Dark Souls 2. If you need a refresher, there's this very comprehensive video from the Brothers Code, or this shorter one from VaatiVidya. But with that said, let's get weird. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus describes absurdist art as a lot of things. Because he's a French philosopher, which means he's wordy, and his ideas are just as romantic as they are convoluted. But I think that this quote, which speaks more on the motives behind absurd art rather than the themes themselves, is a good starting point. Outside of that single fatality of death, everything, joy or happiness, is liberty. A world remains where man is the sole master. What bound him was the illusion of another world, the outcome of his thoughts ceasing to be renunciatory, flowers and images. It frolics. In myths, to be sure, but myths with no other depth than that of human suffering and, like it, inexhaustible. Not the divine fable that amuses and blinds, but the terrestrial face, gesture, and drama in which are summed up a difficult wisdom and an ephemeral passion. Told you. It's wordy. But wait a second. You were promised Dark Souls 2 content. What does this have to do with that? Dark Souls 2 did something that initially turned fans off. It explained things. Its opening cutscene is starkly different from 1 or 3. It has way more talking, and it doesn't focus on the bosses. Hell, the inciting incident of the narrative isn't even the linking of the fire or not, but rather, it's our character, and their journey to understand or even undo their undead curse. And this is painted as totally pointless. The bearer of the curse is doomed. This is what Camus might call being defeated in advance. We all know a priori, that's through deduction for the normal folks at home, that everyone dies and the world is impermanent. Nihilism, which we might call the alcoholic father of absurdism, is obsessed with this fact. It says that it's just as easy for us to not exist, and the world keeps turning, so nothing really matters. Well, absurdism doesn't disagree, but like all children, it revolts. The absurd in absurdism can loosely be defined as the rational gap between existing in an inherently meaningless world, but seeking to create meaning within it nonetheless. Concisely, it's living as if life has an ultimate meaning, despite knowing that to be untrue. This contradiction is something Camus refers to as a leap, which conjures more thoughts of the introduction to this game. At the very end, the bearer of the curse is standing there, perhaps tepidly, over a churning gyre of ghastly dark.
Gyre.
Fuck. Which, thanks to all that exposition, we know is their only hope for survival. They plunge. They take the leap and we join them. Absurdism at its core is the belief that the best way to live life is to exist in that gap. Embrace the contradiction of being doomed to suffer while living on your way to dying anyway. But you do so with your own lucid purpose, especially if that purpose is lost causes or frivolous endeavors. Because those silly things, like us, might as well not exist. Like art, or Dark Souls, or writing an essay about how Dark Souls made you feel. As Camus puts it, we give the void its colors. That is our fate. Camus calls meeting this fate head-on revolt. That is to live in the absurd gap. But what does it look like when we shrink from that fate? Or try to cheat it? Well, Camus argues that we ultimately cheat ourselves. I can finally talk about the second most famous line Camus ever wrote. You may have heard it before. There is but one truly serious philosophical question, and that is suicide. Camus wrote these essays to explore whether or not suicide is morally right in an uncaring world. Spoiler, it's not. Camus talks about two kinds of suicide. The literal kind, and what he calls philosophical suicide. Literal suicide is just as it sounds. Denying the course of life, turning the game off, refusing the time to exist that you've chanced into. At its core, giving up. Philosophical suicide is also giving up. Not only giving up life, but giving up control. It's the easy option, where you don't have to figure things out for yourself, but instead you submit to some pre-made philosophy. This could be anything from religion, shout out J-Man, to obsessively trying to hide your fuck jawline and behind a Bugatti. But it's not just doing these things. It's doing them because someone else told you to. Whether that be your religion, your parents, friends, or the powers that be. The important part is that you're not doing things because you want to. Well, that's great, but two problems. One, there is no actual death for our character in Dark Souls. They can't commit literal suicide. Trust me, I've tried it. But my character keeps picking up their greatsword just to go get spit roasted by the Dark Lurker over and over and over, and about 13 more humanities worth of over again. And two, nobody in Dark Souls 2 is trying to get me to donate my money to a cult that's also an MLM and not a pyramid scheme in exchange for ultimate purpose and power. So then, where do these fit in? Well, let's talk about hollowing. When I played Dark Souls 1 for the first time, I got the sense that all the hollows in Undead Asylum or Undead Burg were all like me once. I could become like them. To me, they represented people who had turned the game off, who lost their will to continue because through every defeat, they forgot why they started in the first place.
Those who come to Dranglake seeking salvation soon lose hope and turn hollow. It happens to them all, sooner or later. That blue knight at the base of the tower, his spirit is already broken. Although he does offer sound advice. Perhaps he is a foreshadowing of your own future.
Hollowing, like suicide, is a decision not to go on. So we can say that this outcome exists poignantly within the context of Dark Souls 2. And by avoiding that outcome, we are one step closer to becoming an absurd protagonist. So then what about philosophical suicide? Let's talk about the eponymous first sin. This is Dark Souls lore, so take it with a grain of salt. It's obtuse and it's beautiful, and we love it for that. The widely accepted interpretation of the first sin is Gwyn's linking of the fire before the events of the original Dark Souls. Aldia, our favorite overcooked marshmallow burn victim, is the scholar of the first sin. He's obsessed with breaking the cycle of light and dark that Gwyn created.
Once the Lord of Light banished dark and all that stemmed from humanity. And men assumed a fleeting form. These are the roots of our world. Men are props in stage of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will remain a lie.
The cycle that we find ourselves in, the linking of the fire or not, is the lie. It is the illusion of another world. One where only two paths exist because we've been told so. Hell, maybe it's even true. But if we struggle to do one or the other, we give in to being defeated in advance. We willingly give up our agency for comfort. We only look left or right, instead of up and down as well. And Aldia is fucking begging you to look around, to defy the rationality of the cycle by resisting. He explains both sides.
All men trust fully the illusion of life. But is this so wrong? A construction, a facade, and yet a world full of warmth and resplendence. Young Hollow, are you intent on shattering the yoke, spoiling this wonderful falsehood? Young Hollow, there are but two paths. Inherit the order of this world, or destroy it.
The order of the world, the linking or not linking of the fire, is to be destroyed. We've talked about the Curse Bearer's doomed quest, and their ability to get the shit kicked out of them and pick up that +10 greatsword time and again. But there's more to Camu's revolt. A key ingredient is the motivation behind that revolt, like we addressed before. It can't come from an outside source, and there's a certain never say die attitude that comes with it. Camus gives us two examples, archetypes I will be referring to as the lover and the conqueror. The lover, who I mostly wanted to note because it's funny, is represented by a fictional character I had never heard of before named Don Juan, who is basically famous for fucking hard. And look at him. He swagged the fuck out. Of course he's got mythical pull. I didn't have any context when I first read this essay, but after a cursory read, I do want you all to know that this man laid such dastardly pipe that his lover's father, who he killed by the way, had to personally come up from hell to drag him down there. Insane shit. That aside, Camus talks about Don Juan's motivations more than his exploits themselves. Don Juan is an absurd character, not because he's a squirrel looking for a nut, but because he knows what he wants and he goes for it. He flies in the face of morality that others would try to push on him. He does as he pleases, and he enjoys it. He enjoys it so much that when the father comes and drags him down to hell, and he realizes what's happening, he laughs. To the end, he is uncompromising and optimistic in his position, selfishly and without appeal. Now, there's not a Dark Souls 2 character that I can entirely relate that back to, but there are a few that come to mind that share themes. Alsana the Ivory Queen, who despite being a shard of dark that should have seduced the Ivory King and then taken the house, the dog, and the kids, ended up genuinely falling in love with him. So much so that even after his sacrifice to contain the old chaos, she stayed in Elium Lois to fulfill his wishes. It made me think of Laddersmith Gilligan, who's painfully aware of the hellish world he's found himself in, but seems to have a good sense of humor and a knack for making ladders that has kept him from going hollow. Even Blacksmith Lenegrast, who came looking for his daughter, seems to end the game perfectly content, just swinging his hammer and knowing she's safe. These little things, the colors in the void that we all seek or create, are part of the absurd. They are deeply personal and show up in a variety of ways, from making love to making ladders. Love giving purpose to life is easy enough to understand. But can we find purpose in struggle? The Conqueror is the second character that Camus presents. This essay is written in the first person as a monologue of the character that we assume is the Conqueror. And this guy isn't necessarily about conquering, but rather the struggle of conquest and how it brings him into his existence. Conquerors know that action itself is useless. I shall never remake men, but one must do as if, for the path of struggle leads me to the flesh. Even humiliated, the flesh is my only certainty. He's only concerned with the fight in front of him, even though he knows it's useless. This is the absurd. He goes on, I maintain my human contradiction. I establish my lucidity in the midst of what negates it. I exalt man before what crushes him, and my freedom, my revolt, and my passion come together in that tension, that lucidity, and that vast repetition. This stoic, if a bit edgy dude knows that he is doomed to an impossible task and finds meaning in its crushing nature. Now I want to get a little meta here. Step away from the narrative and look at the protagonists as the player themselves. This poor funky little guy whose face you spent an hour fucking up is, after all, your vehicle of the experience and represents you in the narrative. Most people I've met that go bananas over the Souls games have some level of masochism present in their gaming philosophy. They come to these games for the cock and ball torture, to die over and over until they get it right, only to move on to the next boss. And boy howdy have I seen some people hit that New Game Plus button a ludicrous amount of times, because they just can't get enough. This generally is the philosophy and purpose we transpose onto the bearer of the curse. They retain their clarity through struggle. The challenge keeps them from going totally hollow. I draw from the absurd 3 consequences, which are my revolt, my freedom, and my passion. By the mere activity of consciousness, I transform into a rule of life what was an invitation to death, and I refuse suicide. I know, to be sure, the dual resonance that vibrates throughout these days, yet I have but a word to say, that it is necessary. The Souls games all smack of cosmicism, determinism, and even taught some of us the stoicism of locking the fuck in. But Dark Souls 2 specifically feels like it's much more about why we keep locking in. Why we keep coming back. It has more characters and dialogue than either Dark Souls 1 or 3 about the purpose of continuing and its frivolity.
The human ego. How many ugly iron castles has it erected? And they don't even see the folly of their ways. But that's what makes watching humankind so delightful.
I hesitate to call Dark Souls 2 absurdist fiction because it's not a book and it doesn't slot neatly into that genre. Games are an artistic narrative medium like books, but the role of you as the player is what makes this absurdity consequential. By the end of the game, if you were paying attention to the narrative and not just mulling over how far the next bonfire is, shout out to my Elden Ring enjoyers, you have all the tools to decide how you think the story should end. Now, after you've clapped Discount Ornstein and Smo, Girl Boss Grim Reaper, and maybe Aldia if you talk to him, you are presented with the same choice as DS1 and DS3. You can either do the thing and link the fire, or leave the boss room. You'll get different end monologues for each option, one from the Emerald Herald for taking the throne, or one from Aldia for exiting. They both make the same allusions to the path ahead being unclear and it being your choice. This is not the end, but the beginning of something else.
There is no path. Beyond the scope of light, beyond the reach of dark. What could possibly await us? And yet we seek it insatiably. Such is our fate.
The end of the game, that unskippable 11 minutes of credits if you're playing Scholar of the First Sin, is death. Sure, you can start New Game Plus, but narratively the bearer of the curse has reached some form of death by linking the fire. Or if they were very special, by collecting all the crowns and walking off into the Age of Darkness without the ability to die, and committing to the philosophical suicide of Gwyn's ideology by trying to live forever and thus removing life's meaning. Even that ending might mean some kind of death. There's a theory that High Lord Wolnir from Dark Souls 3 is actually the bearer of the curse. So where's the meaning? If everything leads to some sort of death or suicide, well, what was the point?
But the question remains. What do you want? Tell me. Light, dark, or something else entirely?
Well, it's art, so you guessed it. You were the point the whole time. In all that time you spent as the bearer of the curse, every boss, every death, and every do-over, you were engaging in life exactly as intended. You spent hours, and devoted energy many people may have devoted elsewhere, to the flawed work of art that is Dark Souls 2. But the excess is not the meaning. Anyone can be a sweaty turbo gamer and master the Souls games. That achievement, like all achievements, is worthless, because it may as well have not even been achieved at all. The last part of Aldia's little epilogue is important. This never-ending cycle of light and dark deprives our actions of meaning. There is no universal comforting truth behind it. Yet we must seek the next foe, the next challenge, not because the options are seek or die, but because the reality is we will seek and die. Therein lies the absurd. The bearer seeks adversity because there is literally nothing else to do but die, which will, of course, happen anyway. Did you enjoy your experience? Did you remember that your precious minutes you have on this earth are for indulging in everything life has to offer? Did you walk away from the art feeling transformed? Did you cherish your experience? Or did you mindlessly consume? Did you play it because someone else told you that you had to, or you were a little fake gamer baby bitch? Why we do what we do matters far more than how we do it, or where we end up for it. It is the only thing that matters. Because no matter how you answered to all of those questions, someday this game will cease to exist, and so will you. So all you have is right now. This was a very surface level primer to absurdism. There are mountains of content that do it more justice without tweaking out and drawing little red lines between every theme and something in Dark Souls 2. My co-writer notes that the video that got them into absurdism is a video titled Self-Estrangement by OliSUNvia. I have gone ahead and linked that video in the description. If you guys made it all the way to the end of this video, a huge thank you to you. It is very much appreciated. In the description, I have linked some of my co-writers' creative works if you'd like to go and support them. If you'd like to become a channel member, there is a link below. Channel members, when we have some, will have their names displayed on the outro to every video behind me. As always, like, comment, subscribe, the whole thing. You know what to do. I think that's everything. Thank you guys so much for watching.